When the Abrams tanks arrived in Ukraine, they instantly became the #1 target, with Russian forces offering millions of rubles as a bounty for their destruction. But can Ukrainian tank crews fully trust the one ally they rely on the most in battle?
We have no aviation and artillery. We have only tank.
The Russian hunt for Western tanks is creating massive problems for Ukraine's tank units. On top of that, a chronic shortage of artillery shells is forcing Ukrainian brigades to fight closer to enemy positions, dramatically increasing the already high risks for their tank crews. What does such a perilous battle look like? Let's hear from a Ukrainian Abrams tanker himself. We've been hit a lot recently. A couple of weeks ago, for instance, during one combat sortie, we had 10 to 15 hits in a single day. The feeling is like, I don't know, somebody put a bucket over your head and started hitting it with a bat. But the bucket is much bigger, and the noise is way louder. This soldier was lucky, unlike the crews of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, who were the first to fight in the Abrams tanks delivered by the US. What happened to Ukrainian 1st Abrams tanks? At the beginning of the year, the 47th Mechanized Brigade became the only unit in the Ukrainian army equipped with the new American tanks. Before the Abrams arrived, the brigade had been using a few Leopard 2A6 tanks that had survived intense battles, but there simply weren't enough of them. The newly delivered American machines were sent straight to the front, operating in Avdiivka, a region that had become a focal point of Russian offensive in late fall of 2023. The M1 tanks were thrust into the thick of battle, helping the 47th Brigade and neighboring units halt the Russian advance. But the cost of this success was high. Ukraine lost its first 3 Abrams tanks. The first tank was struck by an FPV drone that hit the ammunition compartment, causing a fire. The next 2 were disabled by guided anti-tank missiles. Yet, in both cases, the 60-ton American machines held up against the attacks. Although damaged, they remained intact, saving the lives of the Ukrainian soldiers inside. Today, Ukrainian Abrams tanks face numerous threats, as their crews explain. We've been hit by Lancet drones, mines, and FPV drones. The Abrams has its vulnerabilities and can be exposed on the battlefield, but these weaknesses pale in comparison to the glaring issues plaguing Russian tanks, which have been reduced by 9,000 units in this war. The American tank surpasses its Russian counterparts in several ways, thanks to its advanced technology, particularly its electronic warfare system. Our electronic warfare systems are more effective than the ones, let's say, and they also offer enhanced crew protection compared to fighting without EW systems. If you agree with this tanker, hit the like button. But a good electronic warfare system is far from the only advantage Abrams tanks have over their Russian rivals. These tanks have their own superpower, as one Ukrainian tanker eagerly shared. Its main advantage is its accuracy. It has excellent stabilization and surprising maneuverability despite its heavy weight. Ukrainian tank crews have another ace up their sleeves to surprise the Russians: the ammunition provided by the US along with the Abrams tanks. What's more, the Abrams has proven to be surprisingly easy to learn for Ukrainian tank crews, who've spent their careers on Soviet-era T-series tanks. A member of the 47th Mechanized Brigade confirms. It's an automatic gearbox. We trained on it in Germany, at a NATO training ground. It's as easy as a scooter. Driving it is as simple as a scooter? Yes. But it wasn't just the mechanics of the Abrams that turned out to be easy to master. The gunner of a Ukrainian crew was equally surprised by how user-friendly the American tank is compared to Soviet machines. Did it take you long to get the hang of the system? The first time I saw the inside, coming from a T-64, I thought it would take a month to figure everything out, but it turned out to be incredibly quick. You could master it in about a week. The ease of operations, cutting-edge targeting systems, and its maneuverability all make the Abrams one of the most effective tanks in the Russo-Ukrainian war. But, as always, there's a catch. Against vehicles, if it were tank-on-tank battles, this would probably be the most successful model. But right now, these aren't tank battles. This shift in tank warfare tactics is confirmed by a 47th Brigade Abrams commander. You see, we don't fight in a way where it's just tank versus tank. If it were, there'd be no question. The Abrams would dominate. A T-72 wouldn't even come close. Today's warfare looks very different from what we've seen in movies like Fury. tank-on-tank duels are rare. Want to learn more? Click on our video about modern tank battles. In reality, the primary threat to Abrams tanks isn't other tanks, but anti-tank guided missiles, ATGMs. While the exact number of Abrams tanks lost by Ukraine isn't confirmed, some pro-Russian outlets like Military Watch magazine claim that the Ukrainian army has lost about 20 Abrams. Meanwhile, more reliable sources like AP News report losses of only 5. Either way, this is a significant number, considering Ukraine received just 31 Abrams tanks in total. Most of the Abrams losses occurred due to Russian ATGMs, particularly the Kornet system. This isn't the first time Abrams tanks have faced such a threat. In 2016, Saudi Arabia lost 20 Abrams tanks in battles against Yemen's Houthi rebels. Back then, the Houthis destroyed one Abrams after another using Soviet-era wire-guided ATGMs with a range of up to 2 miles. The main cause of these losses was attributed to flawed strategies that failed to account for modern combat conditions. First, Saudi crews fired on the move instead of engaging from covered positions. Second, the tanks often operated without proper support, making them easy targets. Hopefully, you're finding it easier to hit that subscribe button for more accurate and timely information about the war in Ukraine. Like Saudi Arabia, Ukraine's Abrams tanks are forced to take significant risks due to a lack of artillery support and aviation, but that's only part of the problem. Another major issue is the armor. Ukrainian Abrams operators highlight this vulnerability. Unfortunately, our modification doesn't have the armor. That's its biggest drawback right now. As a crew and as a battalion, the first thing we'd like from our American partners is for them to provide us with dynamic armor to protect not just the sides, but also the turret. This would improve crew survivability. The problem lies in the fact that the US sent older M1 Abrams models to Ukraine, which lack modern depleted uranium armor and didn't include ARAT, Advanced Reactive Armor Tiles, kits. According to Military Watch, this is due to US export policies that restrict sharing sensitive technologies even with allies. So, what do you do when crew and tank protection become critical? Ukrainian forces found a solution using local adaptations. Tankers have been attaching factory-made Contact 1 explosive reactive armor blocks to their Abrams. These blocks have proven highly effective at providing protection. We decided to add our local boxes filled with Contact 1 protection. It's dynamic armor that saves us from cumulative jets, heavy impacts, or FPV drones. We've also added grids to the tanks, which protect us from FPV hits or mortar fire. Every part of the boxes covered by these grids has been tested and really helps. But is that enough to ensure combat readiness? Beyond armor, logistics and maintenance pose serious challenges. The Abrams runs on a gas turbine engine, which is notoriously fuel-hungry. It requires a full 500-gallon tank, burning approximately 1 gallon per mile on rough terrain and up to 10 gallons per hour at idle. Adding to the challenge, these engines are sensitive to contamination and prone to wear due to high temperatures and harsh operating conditions. This demands frequent maintenance to avoid breakdowns, which complicates their use in grueling combat. Even the smallest mistake can disable a $1 million engine, and the same goes for the Abrams advanced electronics, from independent thermal viewers to ballistic computers and other complex components. With such a limited number of Abrams tanks in Ukraine's arsenal, even waiting for repairs on a few units can cause significant problems. Ultimately, the Abrams' biggest issue is its quantity. Despite thousands of these tanks in service worldwide, Ukraine received only 31 units. However, on October 17th, reports surfaced that Australia plans to send 49 of its Abrams tanks, purchased from the US in 2006. While this number won't turn the tide of the war, every additional tank gives Ukrainian soldiers a better chance on the battlefield. Australia's Abrams tanks are the M1 A1SA models equipped with modern targeting systems including thermal imaging, making them particularly effective in nighttime combat. Overall, these Australian Abrams are on par with the modern tanks delivered to Ukraine by the US in 2023. Initially, Ukraine was expected to receive M1A2 tanks, but due to the lengthy preparation process, the decision was made to deliver M1A1SA instead. However, Ukraine didn't lose much in this switch. In fact, all M1A2 tanks produced after 2000 are not built from scratch, but are upgraded versions of M1 or M1A1 models from storage. Meanwhile, the delivered M1A1 SA tanks are equipped with a 120mm smoothbore M256 gun, capable of carrying 40 rounds. The gunner's primary sight includes an advanced laser rangefinder and a thermal imaging camera, and it also features dual-axis stabilization for improved accuracy. While it's too early to discuss building a large fleet of Western-manufactured tanks in Ukraine's arsenal, the country is gradually acquiring modern combat vehicles that complement its stockpile of Soviet-era models. Which tanks do you think would be the most effective for Ukraine's defenders? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How long the machine gunner lives is how long the squad lives. This isn't Browning M2's first war, but in the trenches of the Russia-Ukraine war, this hellish machine has become a key factor in turning the tide of battles. When the machine gun is firing, you don't dare raise your head, even if you're Rambo. A trained machine gunner is a nightmare for the enemy. So why does this 90-year-old American machine gun remain the best in the world? Well, Ukrainian soldiers have some answers for you. This gun only jams under two conditions: if it's filthy and unlubricated, or if it's completely worn out. The Browning M2 can take out Soviet-era armor used by the Russians. It's an incredibly powerful weapon. When this baby gets going, it's terrifying. But seeing is believing, right? These guys know what they're talking about. The American machine gun saved their lives when they found themselves in a tight spot. One morning, a radio call came through. 2 Russian BMPs packed with assault troops were headed straight for their position. The Ukrainian soldiers' position was considered impenetrable, but that morning it was still dark and thick fog blanketed the area. To make things worse, the blanket covering the Browning M2 had frozen solid to the metal. Luck seemed to be on the Russian side, but only for a moment. The machine gunner managed to rip off the frozen cover and then opened fire into the darkness. I was aiming based on sound and instinct, the soldier shared. The rest, as they say, is history. It's worth mentioning that the Browning M2 roars louder than thunder. At 150 decibels, this beast can disorient anyone without proper protection. That's why hearing protection is essential when firing it. But in combat, as we've seen, that's not always an option. As the Russian BMPs crept closer, the machine gunner could see their silhouettes, illuminated by the sparks flying off the impacts. The vehicle sputtered to a halt. Assault troops began jumping out and running. They shouted over the radio, "Reload, they're running!" The attack was repelled, and thanks to the Browning M2, the defenders came out on top. Importantly, despite the intense use, the machine gun never jammed. This weapon is unbelievably reliable. For infantry holding the line in trenches, the Browning M2 is the last hope. When bad weather grounds FPV drones, or poor visibility renders anti-tank systems useless, the sheer storm of hundreds of 12.7mm rounds can stop any light armored vehicle in its tracks. But have you seen what happens when a BMP catches fire and then explodes? The secret lies in the 12.7 by 99mm ammunition, and we're about to reveal it. One of the Browning M2's greatest strengths is the wide range of ammunition it can use. It was long believed that Ukraine was supplied with only 2 types of rounds for this weapon, but it turns out there are at least 12, like the Apostles. So, the Browning M2 and its 12 Apostles. Look closely. Each type is marked with a different color tip, but one of these Apostles is truly extraordinary and extremely rare. Enter the Mark 211 Raufoss round. This ammunition features an armor-piercing tungsten core and an incendiary compound inside. Upon penetrating the armor, the round detonates, spreading the incendiary material inside. Typically, only artillery systems use such destructive ammunition, and those are in much larger calibers. The Mark 211, however, delivers the destructive power of a 20mm cannon shell right out of a machine gun. Did you know there are machine gun rounds with explosive power? Hit like if you did. Congrats! You've passed the Browning M2 theory exam and are ready for the practical test. If you didn't, hit like anyway, because now you're officially in the class. By the way, the Mark 211 round is also wildly popular for sniper work with the Barrett rifle, because this machine gun can also be used as a sniper weapon. Here's how. You take the machine gun, attach a Picatinny rail, mount a scope, and voila. We just switch it to long range mode. The Browning M2 was first used for sniper-style shooting by American forces. Its effective range is 2,200 yards. But during the Vietnam War, US Marine sniper Carlos Hathcock turned his Browning M2 into a sniper rifle, setting a record that lasted until 2002 by hitting a target at 2,460 yards. With a fire rate of up to 635 rounds per minute, the Browning M2 delivers a storm of fire no sniper could match. Here's what happens when a group of soldiers walks into an ambush set by an M2 machine gunner. These Russian soldiers didn't stand a chance, as the machine gunner delivered precision fire. But the Browning M2 also allows you to fire accurately at targets you can't even see. Here's what that looks like. Indirect fire is when you shoot based on coordinates and azimuth. You don't see the enemy, and they don't see you. It's practically an artillery technique. The bullets arc over obstacles and hit the target directly. Now imagine that precision with a burst of dozens of rounds. The technique is impressive, but requires mastery of optics and complex calculations, not something every soldier can handle. Another standout round in this war is the one with the red tip, a tracer round. But wait, doesn't it reveal the machine gunner's position? Why risk firing tracer rounds if it could invite a counterstrike? The Browning M2 weighs 84 pounds, plus the tripod, and then there are the ammo boxes, each weighing 35 pounds. Carrying all this and switching positions every 2 to 3 minutes is no small feat, even with a strong and tireless assistant. But here's the thing, without tracer rounds, it's hard to imagine nighttime hunting. For drones. Every night, the Russians launch dozens, sometimes hundreds, of Shahed kamikaze drones over Ukraine, targeting critical infrastructure. And every night, Ukrainian crews head out on combat patrols. The intensity is really high right now. Air raid alerts go off daily, and there's a huge number of enemy UAVs over Ukraine. In flight, the Shahed drones emit a distinct buzzing sound, but shooting at them based solely on sound isn't practical. They're small and hard to hit. So first, the crew needs to locate the drone in the sky using thermal imaging. In the thermal scope, it looks like a red dot moving across the screen. Once the target is identified, they mark it with a laser designator. Target eliminated. Taking down a single drone often requires at least 100 rounds, an entire box of ammo. Reloading takes precious time, so the Ukrainians came up with a clever solution. We modified the ammo box to hold 200 rounds instead of 100. It's much more efficient. The crew typically arrives at the position in a vehicle, with the Browning M2 mounted on a tripod. In the turret? That doesn't seem to be standard issue either. This kind of weapon modification, battlefield experimentation, and technical innovation has become the norm in this war. Recently, Ukrainian National Guard troops managed to shoot down a cruise missile with a Browning M2. The target? An H-101, Putin's favorite missile, carrying nearly 900 pounds of explosives. Of course, this was an experiment, and success favored the gunners, as the missile flies at speeds of up to 620 miles per hour. But success tends to follow the best, doesn't it? So where else can this American gadget, capable of piercing 25mm armor and sometimes taking down missiles, be deployed? During World War II, Browning M2s were mounted on fighters and bombers. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress carried 13 M2s, while the record holder, Douglas A-26, could pack up to 14. But this war takes versatility to another level. The Browning M2 can be mounted on virtually anything, even dune buggies. Now take a look at this footage from an operation carried out by Ukraine's main intelligence directorate, HER. Russia was using this oil platform for military purposes, outfitting it with radar equipment to monitor the sea and airspace. That had to be addressed. 14 Sea Force assault boats, each equipped with Browning M2 machine guns, stormed the target. Imagine 14 machine guns firing simultaneously. It's like a high-speed cavalry charge. Subscribe to our channel if you agree. By the way, this mission was deemed a success, despite Russian claims that the Ukrainian attack was drenched in blood. But as we say, seeing is believing. Browning M2s are also mounted on Island-class patrol boats and Navy 18 WP-class boats, supplied to Ukraine by the US and Estonia. It's not unlikely that we'll soon see the iconic Browning M2 machine gun mounted on Ukraine's famous naval drones. After all, Ukrainians recently equipped the robotic ground system droid TW-12.7 with this heavy hitter. This gadget can cover 9 miles and unleash a storm of suppressive fire on enemy positions while clearing the way for assault troops to land. It comes loaded with a 300-round ammunition capacity. For perspective, that's roughly the same amount of ammo carried by an assault trooper armed with a Kalashnikov or an assault rifle. However, the Browning M2 fires 50 caliber 12.7mm rounds, giving it the firepower to take out lightly armored vehicles with ease. It's hard to imagine a modern infantry fighting vehicle, IFV, or armored personnel carrier, APC, without a Browning M2 on board. Recognize this 14-ton beast? It's the Max Pro armored personnel carrier, complete with a machine gun turret on top. You might think being a machine gunner on an APC is easier. No heavy lifting for the gun or ammo. But what does this soldier think? On the move, you've got to control the turret joystick with one hand and fire with the other. It's not exactly easy. The joystick is sensitive. Turret speed and angle depend on the force applied, so the gunner needs to not only shoot on the move, but also skillfully maneuver the turret. Lives depend on it, because APC gunners operate at very close ranges. On the Max Pro, 200 to 300 yards is the norm for suppressing enemy infantry. And reloading? Forget about it. That's just too much. The mission for this crew is straightforward but dangerous. Approach enemy positions at high speed, suppress them with machine gun fire, and allow friendly infantry to either safely deploy or evacuate. However, safety in a firefight is a very relative term, so speed is everything. I fire until I'm empty, shout clear, and the driver spins us around and we get out fast. The adrenaline is off the charts. This guy has a tough job. Let's wish him good luck. But it seems the machine gunner on another American APC, the Striker, might feel a bit safer. Here's what his workstation looks like. This is the monitor, with day and night cameras. And here's the joystick for controlling the module and firing. The Striker's remote-controlled weapon system, loaded with 2,000 rounds, makes life easier. On top of that, the APC has side windows for infantry to fire from, offering additional firepower. The gunner's position is also protected by 14.5mm armor, giving them much-needed security. So yes, the Striker gunner has it a little easier compared to others. But here's a question for you. Where is it hardest to be a machine gunner? In a trench, a building, or an armored vehicle? Tell us in the comments. You're watching as the Bradley successfully deploys a Ukrainian assault team, ready to take on an enemy trench. With the mission accomplished, the vehicle starts to pull back, only to face some serious trouble. An enemy FPV drone targets the Bradley, but fortunately, it gets caught in an anti-drone net. However, the crew barely has time to catch their breath before a Russian anti-tank missile strikes the vehicle. Incredibly, the Bradley withstands the hit, once again proving its reliability on the Ukrainian battlefield. And that's just a glimpse of what you'll see in this video. One story will definitely give you chills as it reveals the harrowing experience of a soldier who survived inside a disabled Bradley for a full 6 days. But first, let's rewind to what Ukrainian troops felt during their first encounter with this American IFV in 2023. The vehicle impressed us from the very first minutes of combat. When we started taking machine gun fire, it felt like raindrops were falling on the armor. Everything's great. We just keep rolling. And this was before Bradley played a crucial role in Ukraine's southern counteroffensive in the fall of 2023. Ukrainian forces grew even fonder of the vehicle after seeing how it offered superior protection compared to Soviet-era IFV-1s. Its strong armor makes a big difference. Even when the vehicle gets hit, the crew and passengers are usually safe, thank God. In fact, The Bradley's tough armor has saved troops even in mine blast scenarios. There have been instances in our operations where Bradley's armor saved Ukrainian infantry. I personally survived a landmine explosion and a direct hit from a shaped charge to the turret. Looking at the tablet, everything seemed fine. I was relaxed, thinking this vehicle is incredible. We started pulling back and hit a minefield. Suddenly, we were blown up. I looked up, saw stars in the sky, and realized what had happened. Without a doubt, this machine is incredibly resilient. Another field-proven testament to Bradley's reliability came from a Ukrainian soldier during one of the assaults in the summer of 2023. One vehicle took a hit on the left side near the driver. The armor got torn off, but I didn't even realize it had been hit until I got out and saw the damage. The hull cracked, but nothing catastrophic happened. Hit that like button if you're as impressed by the strength of American Bradley as this soldier. However, no matter how durable Bradleys are, the intense fighting on the Ukrainian front takes a toll on these vehicles. But according to soldiers of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, Bradleys are relatively easy to repair compared to their European counterparts. It hit a mine. We pulled it out, repaired it, and in 3 to 4 days, it was ready to perform missions again. Although, because of the harsh realities of the Ukrainian front, Bradleys cannot unleash their full potential. The reason? Mines. A hell of a lot of mines. We haven't yet been able to fully utilize its firepower because all our actions are restricted by the sheer number of minefields. The vehicles can't operate confidently in open terrain when mine clearance hasn't been fully carried out. This limits their movement. Right now, most of the time, Bradleys serve as a cover from a safe distance or to deliver personnel securely. If we operated in areas with fewer mines, I can confidently say we'd advance much further. Yes, tragically, the southern part of the Ukrainian front is very heavily mined. During counteroffensive attempts in 2023, Ukrainian troops often faced the impossible, advancing through minefields without even being able to wait for sappers. All fields are heavily mined with both anti-tank and anti-personnel mines. Unfortunately, we end up clearing these fields with our own feet because sappers don't always have the opportunity to clear a path for us. As one soldier from the 47th Brigade points out, these vehicles could deliver significantly better results in battles on other parts of the front, like Donetsk and Lugansk regions, where the mining situation isn't as dire. Despite the challenges of navigating minefields, the Bradley IFV continues to play a crucial role in countering Russian armor. Its robust armor and firepower make it an effective adversary, even against Russia's most advanced tanks. Take this video from January 2024, which went viral worldwide. Near Avdiivka, a Bradley destroyed Russia's most powerful tank, the T-90M Prorv. What's even more remarkable is that this battle took place at a very close range, as described by the Bradley operator who took out the cutting-edge Russian tank. The distance was about 200 meters, but when we first approached it, it was around 150 meters. No wonder the Bradley is often called a tank killer. If you want to see even more impressive victories featuring Western heavy weaponry, make sure to subscribe to our channel. The Bradley also took down a T-80 near Novokoprovsk using a TOW-2B anti-tank missile from nearly a mile away. This marked one of the longest tank kills in close combat. However, this is more of an exception than the rule, as the Bradley primarily serves to deliver infantry to the front lines and engages Russian IFVs as its main opponents. According to Ukrainian infantry, the Russian counterparts fall short across the board. When you compare it to Soviet-era equipment like IFVs and APCs, they're in entirely different leagues when it comes to protection. Here's an example. The Bradley wipes out 3 Russian MTLBs in just 30 seconds. And in January this year, a single Bradley crew managed to destroy 3 Russian IFVs in one engagement. Unfortunately, the number of Bradleys on the battlefield remains insufficient, and Ukrainian forces too often have to fall back on outdated Soviet models. This is especially frustrating for those who've experienced the American standard of quality. The only thing I'll say is, after riding in a Bradley, you really don't want to get into an IFV again. Soviet models are simply incapable of dealing with the unique challenges of the Russian-Ukrainian war. If we were operating in this theater of war with Soviet APCs, I can confidently say the brigade would no longer exist. With this density and number of mined fields, every IFV hit would mean losing a squad, with either fatalities or severe injuries. Meanwhile, Ukrainians joke about riding their Bradleys all the way to Moscow. But jokes aside, a video from October this year shows American Abrams tanks and Bradleys finally reaching Russian soil. Together, these machines played a crucial role in capturing Russian military positions in Russia's Kursk region, including destroying enemy fortifications with the TOW-2 anti-tank missile. However, perhaps the most incredible story involving this combat vehicle in the war took place during an assault by the 225th Brigade. In this harrowing event, a Bradley IFV became the sole lifeline for a Ukrainian soldier, keeping him alive for 6 long days. Our task was to reach a designated point, neutralize the enemy, and allow our team to take up a combat position. But as our group moved out, we didn't realize that the Bradley's drop-off point was already under enemy control. I saw movement in the bushes, started firing, and tried to direct the fire. Then I shifted slightly back and felt a sharp pain, like a burning sensation. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. I thought it might be shrapnel from the Bradley. I didn't immediately realize I was wounded. He later managed to provide first aid to himself, applying a tourniquet to his leg. However, his left leg was unresponsive, leaving him unable to walk. The situation grew even more dire when he realized he couldn't count on help. His comrades believed he was dead. My comrades assumed I was dead. I could only move using my arms, and eventually managed to reach the Bradley, where I saw that it was already empty. It's hard to imagine what this warrior endured in that moment, but the toughest challenges were still ahead for him. I spent 6 days inside the Bradley. During that time, I tried to figure out if I should try to call for help. At one point, I even shouted from the Bradley, but my comrades thought I was already dead and assumed it was the enemy trying to lure them into a trap. During those 6 days, the Bradley was hit twice by mortars and once by an FPV drone. At one point, the Bradley caught fire, so I kept a fire extinguisher next to me, knowing it could happen again. I decided to crawl out on my own. Over time, I tried to learn the patterns of when enemy and friendly drones would pass overhead. When I finally got out, I was lying outside the Bradley and started crawling. At this point, his goal was to reach his comrades, but the journey was excruciatingly difficult. I crawled for about 3 hours, covering roughly 7 yards. Every 5 to 10 minutes I shouted, telling them it was me. At that point, I didn't care anymore. I wasn't even sure if they were friendly forces, but I just wanted to reach someone. If they weren't my comrades, at least they would put me out of my misery instead of leaving me to suffer. Despite the constant drone activity, the raging battle, and the grueling crawl, he eventually made it to his comrades. When I shouted my call sign for the last time, saying that I couldn't crawl anymore because my leg was broken, I heard the voice of one of my comrades. This soldier was rescued and is now undergoing treatment. He survived thanks to incredible willpower and the toughness of the Bradley fighting vehicle. Could he have survived in any other IFV or APC? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. In the first months of the invasion, Russian aviation outnumbered Ukraine's by 5 to 1. But soon, more and more videos began to show damaged Russian Su-25s barely making it back to their airfields. Wondering who helped them with it? Well, that happens when a 1,400 American Stinger manpads hits the battlefield. Of course, using weapons from the 80s comes with its own quirks, and who better to explain that than the Ukrainian soldiers who have personally felt the burden of the Stinger on their shoulders. There wasn't even a chance for them, the Russians, to escape, shares a soldier with the call sign SVAT, reflecting on the weapon's impact. The war in Ukraine is currently the hottest conflict zone in the world, where American weaponry is undoubtedly useful. So, to help Ukrainians take down even more enemy pilots, the United States provided them with 3 different Stinger modifications. The first is the manpads version. The second is the FIM-92 Stinger DMS, and the third is the Avenger SAM system. All of them are now active on the battlefield. Here's what the soldiers have to say after putting them to use. It's a very effective piece of gear. If we'd had it back in 2014, the skies would have been a lot clearer than they are now, says Soldier Alexander, speaking about the FIM-92 Stinger manpads. And this senior soldier with the call sign Lawrence shot down a Su-25 on the first try. It was my first experience, my first launch. Hit that like button if you want to see more spot-on shots like these for Ukraine. After all, it takes 5 weeks of training and practice on a laser simulator to learn how to operate a FIM-92 Stinger. At the start of the war, Ukrainians didn't have that kind of time. So what was their workaround? I'd never even handled one, a Stinger, before. No shooting experience whatsoever. While we were on our way and still had internet, we downloaded a video where a US Marine explains what's what. Wow. So a Ukrainian soldier learned to operate a manpads from a YouTube video? Wouldn't be surprised if he finds instructions online to build a Tomahawk missile in his garage and launch it at Moscow. But seriously, his story sounds like an incredible stroke of luck, considering it can take up to 15 shots to hit a single target. As for that unlucky Russian Su-30 in fall 2022 in Kharkiv, it strayed off course and ended up right in the sights of a manpads. The result? Well, you can see it in the video. Alright, we're convinced that an encounter with a Stinger can mark a Russian aircraft's last moments in the sky. But what about helicopters? Can it handle those too? The Ka-52 helicopter is equipped with flares to protect it from manpads, but they couldn't save it from a FIM-92 Stinger strike. The Ka-52 isn't the only one lucky enough to experience American weaponry firsthand. The former commander of the Azov Regiment released footage of a Stinger missile hitting a Mi-35M in Zaporizhzhia. Here's how the soldier Svat describes his shot at a helicopter with a Stinger. 2 helicopters were coming in. They intercepted the first shot as a decoy, but the second one hit the helicopter directly. Russians didn't even have a chance to escape. The helicopter just broke apart as it hit the ground. No one survived. The adrenaline was through the roof after that. As you can see, the manpads fulfilled their main mission. The crews of Russian airplanes and helicopters will now think twice about flying on a combat mission. But in modern warfare, there are many other threats. For example, missiles and UAVs. Is the American Stinger effective against them? Let's try to find out. On the night of August 30th, 2023, the Russians launched 20 cruise missiles of various types at Kyiv. One of them was a Kh-101 air-to-ground missile. It was shot down by a fighter of the Mobile Air Defense Unit Alexander. I'm convinced now that a Stinger can even take down a missile, proven in the field. Our enemy tries to launch missiles and Shaheeds at night, so we attach a night vision device to the Stinger to spot the targets. It might seem like just luck, but another Ukrainian soldier managed to outdo his comrade's success. This guy shot down 2 cruise missiles back to back in northern Ukraine. I heard the missiles coming, and 2 minutes later, I spotted one visually. Threw the Stinger on my shoulder and fired. I heard it hit. Then they brought me a second Stinger. I waited for the second missile, heard it launch, and, well, I took it down too, he recounts. The Russians have upgraded their missiles to make interception harder, equipping the Kh-101 with flares. But despite that, Ukrainians are keeping up the fight. A cruise missile was flying at about 1,000 feet. The speed of our Stinger launcher allowed us to catch up and neutralize it. This Ukrainian air defender is on duty 24/7 with his FIM-92 Stinger DMS mounted on a Humvee. He's quite impressed with the system's performance. We're taking down everything. Thanks to the solid work of this crew, we're hitting our targets on time. And here's how an American AN/TWQ-1 Avenger SAM system, courtesy of the US, takes down a cruise missile. Didn't stand a chance. But there's still another aerial threat. Russian UAVs. How will the Stinger handle them? During another attack on the Kyiv region, Ukrainian air defense operator Alexander shot down a Russian Shahed 136 UAV with a single Stinger shot. Meanwhile, Marines from the 38th Brigade destroyed 7 enemy strike drones in just one night. Impressive. So how was the FIM-92 Stinger proven so effective in modern warfare? The key lies in its cost effectiveness. its price tag is far lower than the targets it takes out. Let's look at how this plays out with a Ukrainian crew in action. Air Defender Alexander has destroyed 12 aerial targets, marked by painted tridents on his Humvee. His tally includes 2 Su-25s, 2 Ka-52s, 2 Shahed 136 UAVs, and 5 Orlan 10 UAVs, a combined worth of approximately $57.7 million. Typically, taking down one target might require up to 15 missiles. Assuming the maximum of 15 missiles per target, that's around $27 million in costs, still only half the value of the Russian equipment taken down. With 1,400 FIM-92 Stinger manpads now on the battlefield, Ukraine's air defenses have been significantly strengthened, proving their edge over Russian weaponry. It's chilling to imagine what could have happened if these systems hadn't been delivered on time. Ukrainians couldn't have sourced a comparable number of Soviet-era Igla manpads, and even if they had, would they be as effective in modern warfare? The question is rhetorical. Of course, reliable high-quality weaponry is just half the battle. Knowledge and training are crucial too. So where did Ukrainian soldiers get such precise Stinger skills? Resources are limited, and every shot counts. To avoid wasting live Stingers on training ranges, the Ukrainian company Skiftech developed a portable laser simulator. With it, soldiers can practice 1,000 shots if needed, then hit real targets in combat with confidence. The device can be used on ranges in various weather conditions. For example, this soldier, along with his commander and a comrade, is practicing shooting down a drone in open, windy terrain. While one soldier pilots a DJI Mavic, another identifies the target and fires with a simulated shot. Ready for combat. Target search. Target in sight. Azimuth 230. Target is isolated. Destroy it. Target locked. Fire. After the shot, a notification sounds from the simulator's speaker, confirming the target hit. This lets the instructor begin analyzing the results on a tablet. Here's what he says. We have the results. Battery detached on time, meaning it was removed within 5 seconds. And for the shooting results, target hit. The simulator replicates the full weight of a combat-ready Stinger. It includes every part of the Stinger: a cooling unit that heats up, guidance systems, a safety, sights, and all other components. The instructor can also increase training difficulty by enabling a heat flare simulator within the app. This device allows soldiers to train against real aircraft, helicopters, and drones. For instance, in this video, a GUR-MO soldier is practicing with the training system against a simulated enemy on a UH-60A Black Hawk helicopter. This tool helps drill the maneuvers to muscle memory, actions that would be prohibitively expensive with a real Stinger. Essentially, we can fire as many times as we want, shares a representative from Skiftech. Ukrainians have found a creative way to conserve their resources, especially since they don't have the industrial capacity of the US. But the question remains, can America truly equip itself for the wars of the future? As experience has shown, the war in Ukraine is the largest armed conflict of our time, where Russia deploys every weapon type except nuclear. The fighting is so intense that manpads are practically considered expendable. Ukrainians are shooting down dozens of targets daily. Their experience has made one thing clear. It's not just Ukraine or even NATO allies who might face a shortage of Stinger missiles. Believe it or not, the United States hasn't built a new Stinger missile since 2005. The terrorists US forces fought didn't have jets, helicopters, or large numbers of drones. To replace the 1,400 missiles sent to Ukraine, the Pentagon signed a $624.6 million contract to produce new Stinger missiles in Tucson. Without the Ukrainian aid packages, the Stinger production line might have stayed dormant until a conflict around Taiwan sparked it back to life. According to the Pentagon, it will take about 2.5 years to get the first units off the production line. Why so long? Several components for these manpads are no longer in production, meaning new ways to restart and expand manufacturing are needed. It was only during the fighting in Ukraine that the US recognized and began addressing this issue. One temporary solution to replenish US stocks has been refurbishing out-of-service missiles. Thanks to this, 1,900 missiles have been returned to Army warehouses for training and combat. This approach not only saved the US $50,000 per missile, but also allowed for increased support to allies. In the Russia-Ukraine war, the Stinger hasn't just gotten a second life. It's proven the effectiveness of manpads as a weapon class, even in extreme conditions. Could you imagine, in any other conflict, fighters with a Stinger on a boat shooting down a Russian Su-30SM jet? In Ukraine, this became possible thanks to Western weaponry and the expertise of the main Directorate of Intelligence's operatives. The Pentagon has closely examined these lessons and drawn conclusions that US adversaries won't like. The government has contracted the production of new Stinger missiles and the development of a modern replacement. In doing so, the US will bolster its own security and assist allies waiting for this weaponry to strengthen their defenses. Which American weapon would you like to hear about in our next videos? Share your thoughts in the comments. These are the aftermath of strikes delivered by American Himars rockets. We always hit with sniper-like precision. Yeah, even if you think you've got balls of steel, a 227mm Himars rocket will strike them dead on. At first glance, it might seem like this equipment could be repaired or maybe scavenged for parts. But take a closer look. See those 180,000 tiny tungsten carbide fragments? They sliced through metal like it was paper. Every part of this vehicle is riddled with holes. The chassis, engine, fuel tank, transmission, even the truck's leaf springs, all shredded by the M30A1's shrapnel. This isn't just damaged equipment, it's scrap metal. And as for the enemy personnel, Himars is generous to its friends, like Santa with a bag of precision presents. But for enemies, surviving a hit from these rockets would require divine intervention. Seriously, it's like being hit by a celestial shotgun blast. Who could walk away from that? I first saw a fireball, then, in an instant, the entire clearing was littered with bodies. I've never seen anything like it in my life. When this Russian soldier's comrades arrived at the strike zone, it was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that only comes with death. That's the work of another Himars projectile, the GLMRS M30. Its cluster warhead carries 404 M101 dual-purpose submunitions, designed to tear through both armor and personnel. What's left after a strike? Dust, twisted metal, and no survivors. If it's not the most effective system on the battlefield, it's definitely among the top. The sheer power is astonishing. But what makes the American Himars so untouchable? Why can't the Russians neutralize it? The first standout feature, Himars boast an arsenal of over 10 different types of rockets. That's right, no other MLRS in the world comes close. Which specific munitions are being sent to Ukraine remains classified, hidden even from the Washington Post. But don't worry, we'll lift the curtain a little. You've already seen the destructive beauty of cluster munitions and tungsten-packed warheads, but the first Himars strikes in Ukraine during the summer of 2022 pointed to a different payload altogether. Nearly all Russian targets hit in the first weeks of Himars deployment were 25 to 50 miles behind enemy lines. Many Russian ammo depots and troops were annihilated. In just a few days, around 20 major depots were obliterated. Most went up in flames, with their entire stockpile of shells and rockets detonating in spectacular fashion. These strikes were courtesy of the GMLRS with a high explosive warhead, tailor-made for such missions. But how did the Russians let this happen? It boils down to logistics. Russia relies almost exclusively on railways to supply ammunition to the front. The munitions are then stored in depots conveniently located near railway stations. Here's the catch. These depots have fixed and easily identifiable coordinates, and Himars rockets, guided by a 24-channel GPS receiver using ultra-secure communication links, don't miss fixed targets. Intel on depot locations is straightforward. Reconnaissance can track the trucks loading up munitions to supply frontline units, and then
Все, що потрібно зробити.
All you need to do is input the target's coordinates into the computer, press a few buttons, and launch the missile. Now imagine this. Loading these Russian depots takes hours, because, get this, Russian soldiers load ammo by hand. While they're sweating it out, satellites from every nation with eyes in orbit have all the time in the world to capture the scene. There's no way to hide this slow-motion disaster. And so, the depots go sky high. Sure, credit also goes to American satellites for pinpointing the targets, but Himars was the ace in Ukraine's hand during its first counteroffensive in eastern Ukraine. With the depots destroyed, Russians can't blanket our infantry and artillery with fire anymore. Himars fits perfectly into the maneuver warfare doctrine embraced by Ukraine's military. These systems can strike anytime, anywhere.
Працювати ця техніка дозволяє.
We can execute missions on any terrain, in the field or on the road. It makes no difference. But here's the real kicker. The actual circular error probable for GMLRS turned out to be 2 to 3 feet, far better than the 23 feet guaranteed by Lockheed Martin. In other words, Himars rockets are even more precise than expected. That's a game-changing advantage. And hey, if you think that's impressive, hit that like button. This bold plan was born in Kyiv to liberate Kherson in southern Ukraine. The operation became the crowning debut of American Himars, and now you'll understand why it would have been impossible without these systems. Kherson was the only city on the right bank of the Dnipro River that the Russian army occupied in 2022. The Russians had dug in, building strong defensive positions and fortifications. Attacking these with infantry and tanks was near impossible. Why? The open terrain surrounding Kherson stretched for miles, offering no cover. Advancing across it was practically a suicide mission. To make matters worse, the Russian grouping in the area consisted of over 20,000 troops. For Ukraine to counter this force, they would have needed 3 to 5 times as many soldiers. Reserves they simply didn't have. But there was a critical weakness. All supplies for the Russian forces in Kherson had to cross a few key bridges. And this is where Himars stepped in, taking those bridges under relentless fire control. Hitting a bridge with an MLRS from 40 to 50 miles away is like shooting a thread with a crossbow. But thanks to the unexpected precision of GMLRS rounds, it was possible. The computer shows us when we're in position to hit the target. The commander gives the order, and we launch. However, it wasn't just the munitions doing the magic. Got a job, we're rolling out. Himars crews near Kherson worked non-stop for 37 hours straight. Ukrainian officer Koval told the Wall Street Journal about their grueling but crucial efforts. Putin's generals faced an impossible challenge, destroying the Himars launchers. The problem? They were like bees, constantly on the move. The mobility of this machine is fantastic. It can go anywhere, and on the road, it reaches very high speeds. That's why we were able to change locations so quickly. By mid-October 2022, movement across Kherson's bridges was almost completely halted. Ukraine used GMLRS M31 rockets with high-explosive warheads to achieve this. While these warheads couldn't completely destroy massive bridges, 200 pounds of explosives isn't enough to demolish such structures. The solution was simple. Instead of trying to obliterate the bridges, Ukrainians targeted the roadways, making craters faster than Russian engineers could patch them up. GMLRS rockets punched hole after hole in the pavement, day after day. And guess what? It worked. To avoid a complete disaster, the Russians were forced to retreat to the left bank of the Dnipro. Had they failed to do so, the war might have taken a dramatic turn, as most of the 20,000 Russian soldiers would have either been destroyed or captured. Putin lost face withdrawing his troops from Kherson, but in doing so, he saved his army. Meanwhile, Kyiv celebrated a victory that likely wouldn't have been possible without Himars. Ukrainians themselves acknowledge this. We used to fight with outdated Soviet-era weapons. Now we finally have modern, powerful systems that can lead us to victory. Working with Himars is an honor for every member of our battery. Such precise and advanced equipment brings us closer to victory. By now, every Ukrainian knows the name of this American rocket artillery system. But you're probably wondering, why didn't the Russians shoot down the GMLRS rockets? Here's the thing, the Russians tried to intercept them from day one of the Himars mission in Ukraine. Footage from the Kherson operation shows Russian air defense systems launching interceptors, but all attempts to take down GMLRS rockets failed. If a missile is launched, there's a 99 out of 100 chance it will hit the target. That's because Himars is no ordinary MLRS. GMLRS rockets first climb to an altitude of up to 65,500 feet, then descend on their target at a nearly 90-degree angle, reaching speeds of up to 2,700 feet per second. Given the relatively short range of GMLRS, air defense operators simply don't have enough time to react. All they can do is watch it on their radar as it comes crashing down. For example, operators of the Russian Pantsir S1 system only have a few seconds to respond and fire, but even then, the system can engage only a limited number of targets at once, 4 within a 45-degree range and 2 within 90 degrees. And let's not forget, a Himars container holds 6 GMLRS rockets. The coordinates for all 6 rockets can be set at once. They can target multiple objectives, or all 6 can focus on a single target. On radar screens, 2 or more rockets appear as a streak instead of a point. Operators never know whether they're facing 2 GMLRS rockets or all 6. But what if 2 Himars units launched simultaneously? A tactic frequently employed by Ukrainians. For the Russians to reliably shoot down Himars rockets, they would need an incredibly dense air defense network. Achieving this is nearly impossible because such concentrated systems would themselves become juicy targets. Even when such duels do happen, they resemble a miniature war. Take, for instance, the Ukrainian attack on Kursk, a city shielded by dozens of air defense systems. The Ukrainian forces deployed a buffet of weaponry: Storm Shadow missiles, mauled decoys, harm anti-radiation missiles, GBU bombs, and Himars systems. The strike also involved Su-24 and Su-25 jets, 2 F-16s, 2 MiG-29s, and even FPV drones. The skies were packed. Now imagine the chaos on the radar screens of Russian air defense operators. How exactly this Ukrainian orchestra coordinated its efforts remains a mystery, but the operation managed to hit the largest communications hub in the region. The result? Even Russia's advanced air defense systems couldn't withstand a multi-pronged, diversified attack. To counter Himars specifically, the Russians sometimes resort to full-scale GPS signal jamming. But here's the catch: these powerful disruptions also affect their own troops. As a result, such jamming is limited to specific areas and short durations, making it far from a reliable solution for neutralizing Himars. This forced Russian forces to relocate their depots and command centers out of GMLRS range. Only then did the US agree to supply Ukraine with another powerful munition from the Himars arsenal: ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile System. If you think this should have happened sooner, hit that subscribe button. Here's the kicker: ATACMS takes Himars to an entirely new level, transforming it into a tactical missile system with a range of up to 186 miles. This isn't just an upgrade, it's a game changer. Imagine Floyd Mayweather moving up a weight class and still dominating his champion. ATACMS quickly earned a reputation as the ultimate slayer of Russian S-400 and S-300 systems. But what about other rockets in the Himars arsenal that have proven themselves in Ukraine? So far, we haven't seen the GMLRS-ER extended range rockets in action. These upgraded versions of the GMLRS can strike targets up to 93 miles away, nearly doubling the original range. We also haven't witnessed the new PRSM, Precision Strike Missile, which boasts an impressive range of 310 miles. These are expected to gradually replace MGM-140 ATACMS tactical ballistic missiles. Fingers crossed for their debut. Clearly, the full potential of the Himars system in Ukraine has yet to be unleashed. This is why the Russians are desperate to destroy the launchers themselves to take them out of the game for good. But that's easier said than done. First, Ukrainian crews are exceptionally well trained. Our partners took our training very seriously. Second, Himars systems primarily operate at night, swiftly changing positions after firing. Reloading the system takes just 5 to 10 minutes. With our speed, the chances of catching us are next to zero. Third, Himars is well protected. The launcher module and fire control system are mounted on a sturdy truck chassis, with the cabin and undercarriage reinforced with armored steel plates. This makes it capable of withstanding blasts from several pounds of explosives. So far, not a single Himars has been destroyed. Well, except for a few wooden ones. Wait, what? Wooden Himars? Yes. Ukrainians have been deploying decoy models in forests to confuse the enemy. It wouldn't be surprising if Putin is being briefed on their destruction. In reality, around 40 Himars systems have been delivered to Ukraine by the US since the war began. The exact number in active service or under repair is unknown. However, we've seen footage of a Himars damaged by a mine and sent back to the US for repairs. Notice how the wheel is blown off, but the cabin remains intact, meaning all 3 crew members, the operator, driver, and commander, survived. Here's another clip showing a Russian Lancet drone strike on a Himars after it had completed its mission. As we can see, the drone's 6.5 pounds of explosives weren't enough to destroy the system. This launcher is likely headed to the US for some treatment as well. The first possible destruction of a Himars occurred 622 days after they debuted on the battlefield. During that time, Ukrainians managed to destroy 767 Russian MLRS systems. Not a bad score, wouldn't you say? But is there anything in the world more advanced than this American rocket system? The Russian Uragan? The Chinese WS-2D? Or maybe the North Korean KN-25, which boasts a confirmed range of up to 250 miles? Drop your pick in the comments, and we'll create a head-to-head battle video between Himars and the weapon you choose. The Mameluke sword is a weapon adopted by the United States in 1825. While the ancient Mameluke swords have not been supplied to Ukraine yet, and are used only for ceremonial purposes by the US Marine Corps. But we discovered that during the 2.5 years of the war, the United States and its allies handed over a whole lot of old junk to Ukraine. These weapons could not be sold, and their disposal was apparently so expensive that successive US presidents hoped to pass this mission on to their successors. The perfect example is the M1 howitzer. Some people complained that Ukraine was given these old American howitzers. It turns out that the Russians also complain about them, but for a slightly different reason. The answer surprised us. Now it's your turn to be surprised. So why did the old weapons that should have been thrown away actually work? The M1 is a standard US light field howitzer from World War II. No one could have guessed that this weapon of the past would start firing again. And even more so, no one could have predicted it would be so effective. The thing is that it is very light. The carriages of the first prototypes of the M1, which appeared in 1927, were adapted for towing by horses. Fortunately, in 1939, a truck-mounted carriage was developed for the M1, and the howitzer came to be manufactured with this particular carriage. Give us a thumbs up if you're also happy that the poor horses were finally freed from the hard fate of pulling cannons. But even with the new carriage, the weight of the M1 remains very pleasant, 4,980 pounds. Any large off-road vehicle, let alone a Humvee or truck, can handle this weight. The carriage of this particular M1 is a bit lighter, because its frame has holes from the debris. These are the consequences of a dense counter-battery fight. Ukrainian artillerymen say that the 105mm M1 releases little fire from the barrel when fired, and does not make a very loud sound. Therefore, the sound of the shot does not travel too far, and at night, it is impossible to see where the fire is coming from. Nevertheless, the risk of being detected is very high, which is why both Ukrainian and Russian artillerymen operate on the shooting and running principles. The M1 has a rate of fire of 4 to 5 rounds per minute. The range is 7 miles. In other words, the crews always operate near enemy positions, so they are always on the move. But does this howitzer have a future, or did the Ukrainian army get it by accident? Yes, there is a future. For example, Canada and Chile have modernized their M1s. The modernization includes the installation of a new Royal Ordnance barrel with progressive rifling and a new muzzle brake. And now these ancient howitzers can fire all existing types of 105mm ammunition, including the extended range projectile with the R0663A2 charge at a distance of up to 12 miles. It is not known whether Ukraine has received M101s with modernized barrels. That is, like 50, 100, and 200 years ago, explosions and debris kill, not blasters, to put it bluntly. A photo of an American 60mm mortar shell, the M768A1, was posted on social media. The Ukrainian military calls this munition a luxury. The point is that these mines are equipped with an M734 electromechanical fuse. Indeed, a genius invented this infernal thing. The last batch of these fuses was produced in the 80s. Then, the production of a more advanced electronic version, the M734A1, began. And although the old fuse has a 20-year service life, it still works ideally even 40 years later. Here are its features that are appreciated by the Ukrainian military. M734 has 4 modes: proximity air burst between 3 and 13 feet, near surface burst between 0 and 3 feet, impact burst on contact. Detonation occurs after 0.5 seconds. Delay after impact of 0.05 seconds in fuse explosive train before the shell detonates. The mode is selected manually, but the trick is that if one mode does not work, the fuse automatically switches to the next mode, and so on until the detonation occurs. And most importantly, the mine will not explode in case of a failed shot because the fuse is triggered after 100 yards of flight. Once again, even in the 21st century, explosions and debris are the ones that kill, not blasters. That is why the United States provided Ukraine with artillery shells with a cluster warhead, DPICM. It is believed that the last time the United States used cluster munitions was in 2003 in Iraq. In 2008, about 3 million cluster munitions were sent for storage. About 100 countries have signed the Convention on Cluster Munitions, but in the Ukrainian war, such shells and missiles were used by both sides. Hence, the United States opened warehouses and sent DPICM to Ukraine. These munitions have dozens of sub-elements. When a DPICM explodes, the damage zone can reach 1,000 feet. Thanks to this, one shell of that kind does the job of dozens of conventional high-explosive shells. So the Ukrainian army is slightly compensating for the overall shortage of shells with DPICM. But the oldest American ammunition in this war was probably the M106 203mm artillery shell. It was developed in the United States during World War II for the M1 howitzer, which in 1962 was designated as the M115, and already decommissioned long ago. Who knows, maybe we will see this weapon on the Ukrainian front line again. But there is an almost detective story associated with the ammunition because it is used by Ukraine and Russia. The thing is that the US and Europe switched to 155mm shells long ago, which is why the M106s were gathering dust and rusting in warehouses. But Ukraine is armed with the Soviet 203mm artillery system 2C7 Pion. This is the most powerful howitzer of the war. It has a range of up to 30 miles. However, there was little ammunition for it. Therefore, the American World War II shells came at the right time for the Ukrainian army. Yet what a surprise it was when analysts found that the Russian 2C7 Pion also uses American 203mm shells. How could this be? This riddle has a solution. During Shah Reza Pahlavi's reign, the United States supplied Iran with diverse artillery ammunition, including M106 shells. Most likely, Russia got them from Iran for its howitzers 45 years later. As we can see, even the Russians are running out of shells due to the hellish artillery battle. Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, Washington, D.C., argue that the intensity of its use in Ukraine has proven that artillery is still the king of battle. The war in Ukraine has become an artillery war. Stable front lines and reduced opportunities for aviation have created such conditions. But this does not mean that time has stopped or gone backward, and the development of military technology has ceased. New reconnaissance and fire adjustment approaches ensure the success of old artillery systems and ancient ammunition. Whereas earlier observers used to sit in trees and attics, now drones and UAVs perform their function. More than 100 Russian and Ukrainian drones can operate simultaneously on the contact line within a 6-mile radius. A Ukrainian operator reports that his team detects 70 to 90 FPV drones daily, but can't shoot them all down. drones have become a new challenge and another reason to remember the old weapons. So, the best hunters for drones and UAVs have become the German Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, which were developed in 1963 and have not been used by the Bundeswehr since 2010. Well, except for the United States, other countries supply decommissioned weapons. It's funny, but two paired 1940 designed Ehrlichon guns destroy UAVs not worse than modern systems. Although the range of automatic 35mm guns is only up to 1.8 miles with standard anti-aircraft ammunition, the Gepard ballistic computing system calculates the target's flight parameters precisely, hence a short burst is enough to destroy it. In addition, the old Gepard has a pretty good quality MPDR-12 radar from Siemens with a range of 9 miles. It can distinguish targets, especially drones. Of course, no one expected this. Although the Gepard's range is far inferior to even portable anti-aircraft missile systems, but a shot from a modern weapon may cost tens of thousands of dollars, and the 35mm Ehrlichon does it for $100. And one of the best weapons against Russian barrage munitions like Lancet is the American Browning M2 heavy machine guns of 50 or 12.7mm caliber, which have been in service since 1921. This is such a successful weapon that the United States does not even think about parting with it. Almost 30 armies worldwide have this crazy gun or its modifications in service. The Ukrainian mobile team with Browning M2 consists of 3 people. The Lancets fly primarily at altitudes of 1,600 to 2,000 feet and hunt Ukrainian artillery systems, ammunition depots, fuel trucks, and even aircraft at airfields. When a Lancet flies into a Browning M2 firing sector, the gunner's job begins. In addition to Lancets searching for targets, the Browning M2's hunting target can also be Zala-type UAVs, which conduct reconnaissance and provide target coordinates to Lancet barrage munitions. One shot from a Browning M2 costs $3. A turn costs $100 to $200. That is why this weapon has no alternative so far. Russia is also forced to search its warehouses for combat-ready weapons from the distant past. The enormous losses of artillery systems forced the Russian army to decommission the old D-20 152mm howitzers made in the 1950s and 60s. Russia requested shells for them from North Korea. It's scary to think what the Russians gave Kim instead of the 5 million old munitions that had been lying in storage since the 1970s. In the spring of 2023, the Russian army returned to service with T-54 and T-55 tanks created during World War II to counter the German Panther and Tiger. These tanks were removed from an armored vehicle storage base in the Far East and sent to Ukraine by rail. Up to 2,800 T-54-55 tanks may be in Russian landfills. But we're not talking about adequate storage bases, we're talking about landfills. But we are likely to see even older weapons on the Ukrainian front. The United States and Europe are actively emptying their arsenals. Will it be the turn for the Mameluke sword? Or at least the M4 Sherman and T-34 tanks?